NBC's Washington bureau chief and moderator of Meet the Press, Tim Russert's been covering the story from the beginning. Tim, good morning to you.
Good morning, Matt.
I want to talk to you. Obviously, the president has said he wants some kind of quick military response. He has the backing of Congress. As we'll mention in a second, he has the backing of the American people. What are the considerations going through his mind right now? What are the other things he has to deal with before he can take that action?
Matt, we have to know exactly who to hit. And once we determine that, what are the other ramifications from such a strike? For example, if we decide that it is Osama Bin Laden and he is harbored in Afghanistan and the Afghanistan government refuses to turn him over and we attack Afghanistan, what does that mean for its neighbor in Pakistan? Will Pakistan allow us to use that as a launch site? Matt, I can report to you that on Tuesday, the head of the CIA of Pakistan, the equivalent, was in Washington to soothe Washington about Osama Bin Laden and his relationship to militants in Pakistan. So it's a very dicey situation. Pakistan is petrified that an attack on Afghanistan will mean refugees from Afghanistan, which could create insecurity within Pakistan. Number two, as we talked about yesterday, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, what happens in those countries with militant fundamentalists? A very complicated geopolitical plan has to be devised and not just let our anger be vented. It may cause more problems than what we can solve.
Otherwise, we have kind of a domino effect, as you talked about yesterday. Before I get to the poll numbers here, Tim, yesterday I asked you about, does the president need to go to Congress for approval before any military action? And you said rightly so, legally no. But I do get word this morning that he's working with Congress on legislation that would authorize military action. Explain the difference there.
Open-ended legislation, Matt. It would not be an official declaration of war, but under the War Powers Act, which was passed after the Vietnam War, Congress wants to be consulted. It is politically and probably legally better to have that umbrella approval, but no one would ever fault the president if he unilaterally decided tonight to do something if he felt it necessary.
All right, let's take a look at the results of a new NBC News poll that was conducted during the night and see what the country thinks about this. The first question I want to talk about, do you approve of the president's handling of this terrorist activity? 80%, Tim, give him approval marks. Only 8% disapprove. Not bad for the president.
Democrats, Republicans, independents, men, women, across the board, Matt. Everyone now has rallied behind their commander-in-chief.
Was the president stung by the criticism coming from both Democrats and Republicans concerning his absence from Washington in the immediate hours following the attacks?
Yes, but it was muted as from some limited corners, but nonetheless, yes. And the White House worked very actively last night and during the day to say, folks, understand the reason the president went to Louisiana and went to Nebraska is because we had credible evidence that the White House could have been attacked. They now say that the Secret Service received a phone call that Air Force One may have in fact been a target. It seems quite clear that the plane that struck the Pentagon, in fact, did approach the White House. As to the direct threat to Air Force One, the White House has not been forthcoming.
This next question gives you an idea of just how much in shock and how angry the American people are. The question is, should the U.S. take forceful military action even if it means risking further retaliation or the threat of war? 83%, Tim, said yes.
Matt, the anger is just boiling over. You can feel it in every corner of this country. People want someone to pay a price for this, even if it means protracted war. And I believe that that only is going to build when we see the brothers and sisters of the pilot you had on this morning. When these, quote, victims become real people in our lives, in our hearts, and our minds, people are going to demand action.
Here's another question that's surprising. Compared to the attack on Pearl Harbor, how do you rate this attack 2 days ago? 66% said it's more serious, 25% said equally serious, 5% not as serious. Does this tell us about the enormity of this event, or that people tend to feel most strongly about what's most recent?
Both, but when 90% of American people believe this is as serious or more serious than Pearl Harbor, we understand the magnitude. The fact is, 2,400 people died at Pearl Harbor, military personnel, one government attacking another, one army attacking another. This was an attack on civilians. Brothers and sisters, people who had not signed up for the military, and the death toll is going to be tens of thousands. People understand that.
And people obviously in this country now realize once and for all we are no longer isolated from the rest of the world.
Matt, we always use the word globalization and the global economy. This is, in fact, one world when it comes to terrorism. Nobody is immune. And we talk about our lives and returning to normalcy. We will turn to what we think is a normal life, but we will redefine what is normal.
Well, you know, I'm interested in you just said that, because I want to talk to you about one last poll question here. Ask people, would they change the way they live, such as how and where they travel, because of concerns about terrorism? I have to say I was surprised by this. 64% said no, 35% said yes. My gut reaction here is that we're seeing some bravado here, Tim.
And people are going to go about their lives and try to live them as, quote, normally as they can, but we've lost a lot of innocence, particularly our children. They have been numbed by this experience. They feel threatened, we feel violated. We'll absorb it, and we'll try to very much bring it within ourselves and integrate it into our normal lives. But we all know deep down it's a very dark moment that is going to affect our freedoms and our liberties. We'll do our best. We'll hold our flag high. We'll tell people, we'll be defiant, but we also know we're going to be a lot more security conscious and a lot more careful and a lot more protective of our loved ones and ourselves.
Tim, if you can just stand by for a moment, because we've just been given a statement by former President George Bush, which I'm going to read. Former President Bush says, "I have every confidence that the President will do the right thing. I know of the President's determination, of his personal strength, and of his confidence in his superb national security team. We must review the executive orders and laws that our intelligence agencies operate under, with the goal of enhancing our human intelligence capabilities. Further, if we are to have the best human intelligence, sources and methods must be protected. We must guard against painting with such a broad brush that we cause innocent Arab Americans or Islamic believers anywhere to come under unfair attack. There will be a tendency in some quarters to lump in with the terrorists all those who believe in Islam. This we must strongly condemn. I hope God will continue to give our President the strength he and his team need to continue to lead us and the rest of the world in getting to the bottom of these terrorist attacks, and then in bringing the culprits to justice." Tim, is it likely that President George W. Bush is seeking some counsel from his father? After all, he was, president during the Gulf War. He helped gather together, that had the very delicate job of gathering together and coalescing a lot of disparate countries in support of U.S. action in the Persian Gulf. What role do you think former President Bush may be playing?
Katie, ironically, former President Bush was in the White House on Tuesday morning when this attack occurred. He happened to be visiting there in town. He did not go to the Situation Room and become part of the negotiations or discussions, but he left the White House. But he is someone that the current president loves and respects, and those are two pretty good qualities to have in any advisor. During the situation when our plane was forced to land in China, former President Bush was an invaluable advisor. And I would think that this president will utilize his knowledge and his thoughts and his experiences, and I think most Americans would understand that, in fact, encourage it.
It's interesting, Tim, that he emphasized the need of enhancing our human intelligence. That seems to be almost a national refrain from those in intelligence circles, starting with General Schwarzkopf in the hours shortly after these attacks.
And Katie, you put your finger on something. Right before that, when you read that statement, he talked about executive orders regarding intelligence and military operations. We have an executive order that bans assassinations. There is a lot of discussion in Washington about undoing that.
But although Senator Graham just told me, Tim, that really had been changed in terms of how it had been interpreted.
The case of Pablo Escobar, for example, Tim, when we trained people in Colombia to go after him and not bring him to justice, but assassinate him.
And more, I think you'll see a broader interpretation. This morning, Senator John Kerry of Massachusetts, someone who's thinking about running for President of the United States, said we should kill Osama Bin Laden. There is a new reality in Washington and across this country.
All right, Tim Russer. Tim, thank you very much.